Proposition 30. Temporary tax raises to fund education. Guaranteed local safety funding. Initiative constitutional amendment. Plain language, temporary taxes to fund education. What does it do? Prop 30 raises income taxes on people making over $250,000 a year for the next 7 years. It raises the state sales tax by 1/4 of a cent for the next 4 years. It takes the money raised by these increased taxes and gives it to schools. 89% will go to K-12 schools and 11% will go to community colleges. It stipulates that the money cannot be used for administrative costs, which means that this extra money can't be spent on principals, office buildings, secretaries, etc. They mention this to imply that the money will be spent directly on the students. Prop 30 requires that local school boards must decide in open meetings how this new Prop 30 money should be spent and requires that the spending will be audited every year. Finally, it guarantees that local governments will receive funding to pay for public safety services that have been transferred to them from the state government. Last year, the state began delegating prisoners and parole responsibilities to local counties and promised $6 billion to cover these expenses. Part of this bill regulates the payment plan and stipulations concerning this money. Fiscal impact. The fiscal impact of Prop 30 would be an estimated $6 billion of tax money each year through 2017. Long story short, this proposition would raise income taxes on those making over $250,000 a year and raise the sales tax on everyone, all this to bring in an extra $6 billion every year until 2017. The government would then give the money to schools and use the money to fund other state programs if the governor and/or legislature decide to do so. That last bit is in the fine print. Finally, it would guarantee and regulate state funding to local law enforcement agencies. California's budget this year was drafted under the assumption that Prop 30 would pass this November. What you also need to know about this bill is that if it passes, obviously it will raise taxes and result in more money for the California budget, which will then be used for schools, public debt, and other California projects. But if Prop 30 doesn't pass, the state will have to cut by $6 billion to make up for not having the Prop 30 money. Almost all of these cuts will come from school budgets. Schools will handle these cuts in a number of ways. Some will dip into reserves, others will shorten the school year, community colleges may reduce enrollment, and a number of other cuts and maneuvers may occur. The yes on Prop 30 people say, our schools, universities, and public safety services are at a breaking point. In the last 4 years alone, there have been $20 billion in cuts, 30,000 fewer teachers, and increasing class sizes. Our kids deserve better. They say this is the only measure that establishes a guarantee for public safety funding in our state's constitution, where it can't be touched without voter approval. It will help address the state's chronic budget mess. They say it prevents school cuts. If Prop 30 fails, schools will face $6 billion in cuts. Prop 30 money can be spent to shrink class sizes, get up-to-date textbooks, and rehire teachers. It provides billions in new school funding. Prop 30 helps balance the budget and pay down debt. They say Prop 30 only taxes the rich, and it's just for 7 years. It makes the wealthy pay their fair share. They say Prop 30 establishes the sales tax at a lower rate than it was last year, and that the money will go into a special account that the legislature can't touch and requires mandatory audits to ensure proper spending. They say Prop 30 is supported by the League of Women Voters, California Teachers Association, and the California State Sheriff Association. Finally, they say you must pass Prop 30 or there will be more teacher layoffs and steep tuition increases. Those who oppose Prop 30 say, the proponents of Prop 30 make it seem like it's a choice between a big tax hike or school funding cuts. There are thousands of other state programs, bureaucracies, commissions, and boards, but the thing they threaten us with is cutting schools. It's a false choice. Taxes aren't the only way. Instead of streamlining thousands of state-funded programs, massive bureaucracy, and waste, they want to tax us even more. California politicians just authorized a $5 billion new bullet train. Let's use that money for schools. They say Prop 30 is a shell game. It's not what it seems. It doesn't guarantee $1 will go to classrooms. It allows the use of currently earmarked school dollars for other programs. We'll never really know where that money goes. It's just another excuse for the government to take more money. Prop 30 hurts small businesses and kills jobs. They say Prop 30 doesn't require budget, pension, or education reform. Special interest groups and the politicians they control continue to block pension reform. We have $500 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, and they still refuse to reform. They also won't pass budget reform either. Prop 30 just feeds the monster. We need to focus on growing the economy, creating jobs, cutting waste, and reforming our budget process instead of approving a $50 billion tax hike on small businesses and working families that doesn't provide any accountability or guarantee new funding. Alas, the Wall Street Journal exposed this bill in a recent article saying California Governor Jerry Brown is trying to sell his tax hike to voters this November by saying it will go to schools. The dirty little secret is that the new revenues are needed to backfill the insolvent teachers' pension fund. Even the official title and summary of Prop 30 says the money can be used for paying other spending commitments. So take that, Jerry. There are a few propositions on the ballot this year that I'm somewhat on the fence on, and I could kind of go either way. This is not one of them. In fact, I'm going to bring 2 pencils to the voting booth this November because I'll be scratching the no on Prop 30 box so hard I'll probably break the first pencil. Where to start? This proposition is backed by the governor himself, and he wants more money in taxes. I agree with the no on Prop 30 group all the way. The politicians behind Prop 30 can't keep track of the money they have. What, they want us to believe that this is going to solve California's problems? More taxes? Every election year, here comes the legislature and the California's teacher union and association and whatever we're talking about. We just need a little more money so our kids can get the education they deserve. The children are our future. We don't spend enough on education. Absurd. All of it. They're constantly trying to manipulate all the numbers so that it looks like California spends less on education than anywhere else in the world. But if you include everything that they try to leave out, you learn that some districts in California spend as much as $25,000 per student every year. California is the 8th largest economy in the world. More than 50% of all California's revenue is earmarked for education. The California Constitution stipulates that any time the general fund receives any new tax revenues, 54% of that must go to education right off the top. But that's still not enough. We just need more money. That will solve our problems. 50% of the revenue of the 8th largest economy in the world just isn't enough. Japan spends 3.3% of their gross domestic product on education. South Korea spends 16%, Canada spends less than 5%, but somehow we need more. I'm telling you that $47,279,593,000 that we spend on education every year is going somewhere. The fact that California students repeatedly embarrass themselves on the world stage is an education problem, not a money problem. $47 billion spent on education, and California education sucks. But somehow, all we need is $6 billion more, and then it'll all be okay. Close your eyes and imagine this. California passes Prop 30, and our taxes are raised even more so that schools get $6 billion more each year. Can you imagine the California legislature and the Department of Education and the teachers union calling a press conference and announcing, "We now have enough money. That was just what we needed. Test scores are soaring and our problems are solved. Finally, we got that last $6 billion that was keeping us from academic utopia. Thank you, California." Do you see that happening? You know and I know whether or not Prop 30 passes, they will be right back here in 2014 with the same old story. We just need a little more. It's for the children. Just a little more tax money. For crying out loud, there are 3 propositions on this election alone asking for more money for schools. For those of you who plan to vote yes on this, don't you realize that every election this happens? Have you ever known any government agency to say, "Yeah, we got enough now"? Never gonna happen. The no on Prop 30 people point out, hey, it's not a choice between Prop 30 or cutting education. They chose to set it up this way, and they're right. They tell us we have to pass Prop 30 or $6 billion in school funding will be cut. It's only that way because you set it up that way so that we'd feel guilty and scared if we didn't do what you wanted. If you don't want to cut education, cut something else. But no, they want to take the children hostage so that everyone's heart breaks into voting Prop 30. Plus, it's true, this money doesn't even have to be spent on schools. It's spent on whatever the governor and the legislature decide. We've got fraud going on, we've got exorbitant public pensions going on, we've got mismanaged budgets, sweetheart deals, backdoor payoffs, bloated salaries, poorly bargained contracts going on here. These people will outright misplace millions of dollars. It happens all the time. Oops, lost a couple million. More, please. I've said it once before and I'll say it again. California does not have a money problem. It's a money management problem. California is that neighbor that everyone has. That guy with a great income who's always whining about being broke because every time a dollar comes in, he spends $3. And let me tell you, the California legislative analysts pointed out that almost all the money raised from Prop 30 will be used to pay expenses from last year. They want to raise taxes to pay for last year's overspending so that we can do it all again this year. This is not a fix. There's also that weird line about Prop 30 setting the sales tax at a lower rate than it was last year. I do not know how they arrived at this conclusion. I've emailed them, I've called them, no response. I don't trust it at all, and I'm a little beleaguered with this one and how they think that raising the sales tax by 1/4 of a cent makes it lower. Politics. Prop 38, also on the ballot this year, is a separate measure altogether that intends to raise taxes for schools as well. However, there are some interesting stipulations that occur if both propositions pass. I'll cover the issues between these two in the video for Proposition 38. So a yes vote on Prop 30 is a yes to increase taxes and thus increase California's revenue to fund schools, debt repayment, and other California projects. A no vote is a vote to keep taxes the same and cut $6 billion from California's spending for this year. I will not vote to finance this colossal mismanagement. I will not vote to give a drunk a drink for 7 more years. The Daryl Johnson Show says no on Prop 30.